The morning light seeped through drawn curtains as a single notification chimed insistently in the half-lit room. Across the city, hundreds of other screens glowed in unison, voicemail alerts blinking, email icons pulsing, social feeds endlessly refreshing. In this labyrinth of buzzing promises and fleeting delights, every finger hovered above a touchscreen, ready to tap into a fresh burst of content. The pace was relentless. A commuter on the subway scrolled through headlines about tomorrow's stock rally, memes about celebrity gossip, and breaking news alerts that demanded moral outrage. Every ping was an invitation to fragment attention, to shuttle from one fragment of the world to another without pause or reflection. Even at breakfast, spoons hovered mid-air as eyes darted from bowl to smartphone. A mother captured her child's laughter in a vertical video. Within seconds, she toggled to a conversation with a colleague who was simultaneously responding to a group chat, reviewing a document draft, and placing an online grocery order, all while the infant's giggles echoed beneath her distracted hush. Notifications cascaded like a digital waterfall, banner alerts overlaid weather forecasts, stock tickers, package updates. Rarely did any of these transmissions demand more than an instant's glance, yet collectively they erected an imperceptible barrier between mind and moment. In this chaotic ecosystem, mind-wandering was commodified. Algorithms surveilled every linger and swipe, offering ever more alluring stimuli to snare attention. The internet had become a carnival of diversions, where every stall clamored for patronage, and every attraction vied for prolonged engagement. Like a moth drawn to incandescent neon, billions fluttered helplessly toward diminishing returns of amusement, social comparison, and adrenaline-spiking dopamine hits. The longer one hovered in that swirl, the more a sense of interior emptiness grew. Yet the refrains of self-questioning rarely surfaced amid the digital clamor. He awoke each day feeling both exhausted and wired, as if his psyche were tethered to a high-voltage line that never powered down. During idle moments, he found himself habitually double-checking past notifications, convinced that something crucial had been missed. The more he searched for novelty, the more he felt lost. In front of the mirror, he barely recognized the reflection of a blurred gaze, a consciousness perpetually half-present. The relentless pursuit of information had hollowed out stillness. Genuine silence seemed an alien concept. Then came the flash of insight, a visceral tightening in the chest when a late-night scroll revealed nothing but fragments of other people's lives. He remembered childhood afternoons reading under a tree, the world slowing to the rhythm of each turn of the page. He recalled the warmth of unhurried conversations that delved into dreams, regrets, and hopes. And he noticed with a pang how distant those experiences felt. In the suffocating glow of fluorescent notifications, the soul's voice had grown faint, nearly drowned beneath the digital roar. That moment marked a threshold. As notifications stacked up like tower cards teetering toward collapse, he realized that something profound was at stake, the integrity of his inner life. Modern society celebrated connectivity as the ultimate virtue, but his body and spirit resisted the constant siege. He recognized that the price of digital immersion was a fracturing of attention and a weakening of psychological cohesion. Every ping, every flash, had become a fissure in the armor of self-awareness. In a last-ditch effort, he silenced his phone, turned off email alerts, and refused endless scroll. At first, the abrupt quiet was alarming. His fingers itched for habit. Phantom vibrations vibrated across synthetic nerves. Thoughts surfaced. What if I miss something? What if life moves on without me? Anxiety fluttered like a caged bird in his chest, yet he resisted. He closed his eyes and breathed, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, unmediated by any electronic intermediate. Time slowed. As the hush settled, he felt the raw edges of his inner world emerge. Memories from childhood, long subsumed beneath digital layers, drifted upward. He glimpsed the person he had been before information overload, before the compulsion to document every moment. Slowly, his attention peeled back the layers of distraction. Absent screens, the world revealed textures he had overlooked. The gentle hum of early morning traffic, the complexity of a single bird call in a forest canopy, the softness of light refracting through leaves. He moved outward and inward simultaneously. Outdoors, he felt connected to rhythms beyond the digital network. Seasons shifting imperceptibly, ecosystems humming with life. Indoors, he observed the terrain of his own psyche, moods rising and falling. Inner dialogues he had muted in pursuit of constant external stimuli. He discovered a stillness he never knew he was missing, a spaciousness where thought and feeling could unfold without interruption. In relinquishing the habitual cycle of digital consumption, He ignited a deeper inquiry. Who was he beneath the layers of curated profiles and instantaneous updates? What voices in his psyche yearned to be heard? What narratives in his dreams had been dulled by screen light? This ripping away of digital layers felt akin to a rebirth, a descent into the subterranean levels of the psyche, where archetypal images and unspoken longings resided. He sensed that the vast digital landscape, for all its allure, had become a hall of mirrors reflecting only surface constructs, not the fertile depths of the self. Buoyed by this glimpse, he resolved to journey further. Yet he understood that the path into psychological richness would not lie in simply disconnecting. It would require embracing solitude, ritual, and introspection. Thus began an unfolding transformation, from digital addict to seeker of authentic being. Each day's ritual began with silence instead of notifications. Each evening concluded with handwritten reflections rather than a mindless scroll, and in the interstices of daily life, he practiced presence, noticing the cadence of footsteps, savoring the texture of speech and conversation, observing emotions as they arose. In that first chapter of awakening, the modern overload was laid bare as both a symptom and a barrier. It was the storm that scattered attention, eroded depth, and fragmented the soul. Recognizing its gravity was the critical first step toward healing. Confronted with digital cacophony, he chose to reclaim the silent spaces within, spaces where the raw materials of individuation awaited discovery. The journey had begun, and though the terrain ahead was unknown, a faint glow of psychological possibility guided him forward. An ember of authentic life rekindled beneath the digital debris. Peeling back the layers of incessant digital chatter, he embarked on a journey inward, tracing a path that mirrored the ancient process of individuation described by Carl Jung. Far from a mere escape from screen-based distraction, this quest was a pilgrimage toward an integrated psyche, where conscious intentions and hidden depths might finally converge. He began to sense that the turbulence stirred by constant connectivity had suppressed vital aspects of his character, shadow elements awaiting recognition, archetypal energies longing for expression, and a vacant core yearning for wholeness. His first step was to acknowledge that individuation cannot be achieved merely by withdrawing from external inputs. Instead, it requires active engagement with the unfolding contents of one's inner world. He adopted a daily practice of reflective journaling, setting aside the morning's first hour to record dreams, fleeting images, and emerging emotions. As fragments surfaced, he noticed recurring motifs: a winding labyrinth, a watchful animal, a desolate tower. These images at first appeared disconnected, odd curiosities produced by somnolent reverie. Yet over time they formed a constellation of meaning, illuminating latent longings and conflicts within his psyche. The labyrinth, for instance, seemed to represent his struggles with choice and direction. In waking life, he flitted between dozens of apps and tasks, rarely pausing to consider which truly mattered. Yet within the dream's corridors, he felt both lost and strangely fascinated, as if the maze were alive, calling him deeper into unexplored passageways of the self. Recognizing this, he asked what decisions in everyday life had become automatic, driven by habit rather than authentic desire. Which pathways had he avoided, fearing discomfort or uncertainty? The dream's silent echo guided him to confront these questions through conscious experimentation, declining social media invitations, deferring non-essential tasks, and choosing projects that resonated with his core values. The watchful animal, a recurring figure in his reflections, initially evoked fear, a predatory cat whose luminous eyes tracked his every move. But as he tracked its presence across successive entries, its meaning shifted. The animal embodied a fierce intuition, an instinctual knowing that had been drowned out by his rational, productivity-driven mind. By engaging with that symbol, he began to trust inner prompts more readily. In moments of decision, he paused to notice bodily sensations, the tightness in his chest, the warmth in his gut, or the hollow ache in his stomach. These somatic cues, once dismissed as mere randomness, now served as invaluable guides, steering him toward choices that felt aligned and disempowering distractions that felt flat. The desolate tower carried its own lesson. Rising in isolation atop a barren hill, It suggested both solitude and alienation. At first, that image triggered guilt. Was he condemning himself to loneliness by reducing screen time? Yet deeper contemplation revealed the tower's paradoxical gift. Solitude, when approached with intention, cultivates inner spaciousness, a sanctuary for the psyche to gather strength. He discovered that true aloneness differed from social isolation. It was an active, chosen state in which he could observe thoughts and impulses without external input. The tower beckoned as a place of self-containment, a vantage point from which he could survey the multiple facets of his personality without fragmentation. Gradually, these archetypal encounters coalesced into an experiential map of his inner landscape. He no longer felt adrift in digital currents, but rather in a dynamic interplay between conscious striving and unconscious wisdom. Each symbol, each mood fluctuation, provided a clue to reorient himself. This inner dialogue was neither fanciful nor arbitrary. It followed recognizable patterns that Jung called the transcendent function, whereby opposites within the psyche resolve tension through an emergent third perspective, leading towards psychological wholeness. Complementing his reflective work, he studied key writings on Jungian psychology. He revisited the Red Book, immersing himself in Jung's visionary self-exploration, and discovered how Jung partnered with his own fantasies and dreams to excavate profound insights. He noted the discipline with which Jung recorded his inner experiences, resisting censorious reason that might dismiss them as mere noise. Inspired, he created a modest ritual. Each evening by candlelight, he would re-enter his journal entries, reciting favorite passages aloud, letting the words evoke new emotional resonances. This simple enactment transformed written reflections into embodied encounters, deepening the dialogue between observer and observed, knower and known. As the weeks turned into months, the boundaries between his inner and outer worlds grew permeable. He began to see synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seemed too pointed to be random. A chance street mural depicting a butterfly fluttered near the local cafe. On the same morning, his dreams featured winged creatures. An overheard snippet of conversation about building inner fortresses echoed the tower motif in his journal. These events prompted wonder rather than mere superstition. They became reminders that psyche and world can intersect in subtle, meaningful ways when one's attention attunes to inner motifs. Through these experiences, he grasped the essence of Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming who one truly is, leaving behind the uninvestigated roles, compulsions, and projections that fragment the self. He observed how his former identity had conformed to external expectations, scholarly ambitions fueled by parental approval, social media performances curated for likes, and consumer impulses driven by fleeting trends. Individuation meant relinquishing these imposed scripts and crafting a life narrative aligned with his unique psyche. Yet he recognized that individuation was not synonymous with perfection or static equilibrium. It was a forward movement, a journey filled with regressions and breakthroughs, each encounter with shadow aspects, anger at intrusive notifications, envy toward hyperproductive peers, dread of silence, offered opportunities to integrate disowned parts. He allowed himself to feel these emotions fully, tracking their bodily signatures and tracing their origins in past experiences. By naming these dynamics, he reclaimed autonomy over them, reducing their power to derail his path. This inner work manifested outwardly in subtle but profound ways. Conversations with friends gained depth as he shared insights from his dream reflections, inviting others to explore their own symbols. Creative impulses long dormant, sketches, poetry, guitar chords, began to surface, no longer postponed by a preoccupation with digital output. He found himself drawn to analog activities, walking labyrinth patterns laid in stone, attending local pottery workshops, and experimenting with watercolors. These tactile, embodied practices resonated with the archetypal imagery he encountered, reinforcing the reciprocity between inner and outer expressions of self. In the crucible of this individuation process, Jung's secret emerged. The psyche seeks wholeness through the marriage of opposites. Conscious aims for growth and unconscious gestures of guidance form a dynamic synergy. Digital minimalism, he realized, functioned as a modern invocation of that synergy, not by merely reducing screen time, but by creating fertile ground for interior multiplicity to emerge. The emptiness left by dropped notifications was not a void, but a womb for unexplored potentials. By the end of this phase, he was no longer simply someone resisting digital overload. He had become a participant in a living drama of self-discovery. Instead of reactive scrolling, he engaged in conscious inquiry. Instead of fragmented identity, he cultivated a dialogical self-coherence. The individuated person he glimpsed was neither a hermit nor a technological Luddite, but a conscious navigator, equipped with inner tools, symbolic awareness, somatic attunement, reflective ritual to traverse both the digital landscape and the realm of psyche. As he prepared to face the next challenge, understanding technology's seductive disruption of this inner harmony, he carried with him an increasingly integrated sense of self. The modern individuation path had not concluded, for the psyche's work is never finished. Yet he stood on firmer ground, a traveler who had learned to read inner maps and heed the silent beckonings of archetypal guides. With this foundation, he was ready to confront the next horizon, how digital interfaces mirror and magnify the darker aspects of the self, and how recognizing that dynamic could further illuminate the path to wholeness. Confronted with the liberating clarity of inner symbols and quiet rituals, he soon realized that the greatest challenge lay not in disconnecting, but in resisting the seductive architecture of modern technology itself. These platforms, designed to captivate and compel, mirrored aspects of his own psyche, chiefly the shadow side lurking beneath the cultivated persona. Every scroll, swipe, and like enacted a silent pact. Each moment of engagement traded a fragment of autonomy for a glimmer of validation or novelty. As he studied the interplay between interface and psyche, the seductive dynamics of distraction revealed themselves as potent psychological mirrors. At first glance, the digital environment radiated efficiency and possibility. Infinite libraries of knowledge, global social networks, endless amusements, all available at a fingertip. Yet beneath that veneer lay a complex system of operant conditioning. Notifications chimed with variable schedules, red badges pulsed when attention waned. Autoplay algorithms ensured content cascaded without effort. These cues activated neural reward pathways, releasing bursts of dopamine that reinforced compulsive behaviors. He recognized this cycle from his own responses. His heart rate quickened when an unexpected message arrived. Relief washed over him on unlocking his screen and seeing no new notifications, a small triumph that felt disproportionately gratifying. Simultaneously, technology unearthed latent facets of the shadow, the disowned self, by amplifying insecurities, envy, and performance anxieties. On social media, he encountered polished snapshots of others' achievements, exotic vacations, professional accolades, picture-perfect families. Each image stirred a mix of admiration and insufficiency, magnifying his own perceived failures. The curated narratives of peers morphed into internal critic voices, whispering that his life lacked color and impact. He then felt compelled to craft his own digital persona, fine-tuning posts for maximum engagement, as if authenticity could be measured in follower counts. In this way, the interface enticed him to project an image divorced from inner truth, deepening the schism between self and screen. He observed how in-platform feedback loops exploited his yearning for social acceptance. A notification count rose, prompting fleeting satisfaction. Yet as the glow dimmed, the hunger returned. He experimented by delaying responses. A 3-minute pause before liking a comment felt agonizing, yet revealed how reflexive his digital etiquette had become. The interface had conditioned immediate reactivity, rewarding speed rather than reflection. In resisting that instinct, he discovered a sliver of freedom. Each momentary delay became a choice, a refusal to be yoked to algorithmic dictates. More insidiously, technology mimicked psychic processes, dreamlike narratives woven through endless feeds where fantasy and reality blurred. Scrolling acted as a waking reverie, images dissolving one into another until both content and self sank into a trance. In those states, he found himself unsure which desires arose organically and which had been scripted by targeted advertisements and trending hashtags. The interface, in effect, performed a subtle enchantment. It beckoned users into a collective dreaming, where personal longings were repurposed for commercial ends. By the time one awoke from that trance, hours had dissolved and inner yearnings remained unsatisfied. He noted, too, that technology amplified the shadow's compulsions in the guise of self-improvement. Everywhere he looked, apps promised productivity hacks, minimalist routines, or focus timers. Yet every promise arrived with push notifications nudging him back into the cycle, an irony not lost on him. A habit tracker app meant to cultivate presence would remind him to input his mood 10 times a day. A meditation timer would push alerts to resume a session when he missed a day. Even practices designed for reflection became mechanized chores, stripping them of spontaneity and depth. He recognized the pattern. Any tool aiming to scaffold authenticity risked converting into a digital surrogate, supplanting genuine inner impulses with external prompts. Through these insights, he discerned three core dynamics of technology's seductive distraction: reward conditioning loops, shadow amplification, and trance induction. Understanding them demystified his own struggles, recognizing how interfaces played upon ancient drives, from the need to belong to the fear of missing out, allowed him to reclaim agency. Rather than treating technology as a monolithic adversary, he saw it as a mirror reflecting his unintegrated impulses, each notification a silent call to examine the voices beneath his persona. Armed with that perspective, he devised protocols for mindful engagement. Instead of eliminating all digital tools, he curated his environment to strengthen conscious choice. He disabled non-essential notifications, leaving only messages from close friends, calendars for vital commitments, and health reminders. In doing so, he restored the salience of alerts. Each chime now signified genuine urgency or connection, not background noise. He also revisited the home screen of his phone, arranging only the apps aligned with his values: music for creativity, an e-reader for reflection, a mapping tool to guide real-world exploration. Other applications, once social hooks, were banished to a secondary folder, reducing their gravitational pull. To counter the trance-like quality of infinite feeds, he introduced temporal boundaries. He designated technology-free windows, morning hours devoted solely to writing in his journal, afternoon walks, sans headphones, evenings reserved for drawing or conversation. These intervals created counter-rhythms, restoring the natural ebb and flow of attention. When he did engage digitally, he committed to single tasking, one app, one objective. If he opened a news site, he would read 2 articles and close the tab. If he logged into a social platform, he posted a thoughtful comment or message, then quit. This disciplined approach transformed use from reflex to ritual, reclaiming intention. He also explored psychoanalytic insights to further unpack shadow dynamics. When envy flared at a friend's career snapshot, he paused to trace the sensation inward. Where did the need for external validation originate? In those moments, he revisited childhood memories of parental praise contingent on achievements, recognizing how that pattern had replayed digitally. By acknowledging the original emotional wound, he diffused its power over present behavior. Through this layered work, digital hygiene paired with shadow integration, he undermined technology's allure. Over time, these practices softened technology's grip. Notifications lost their tyrannical pull. He felt neither compelled to respond instantly nor anxious when offline. His home screen, once a carnival of distractions, became a curated altar of intentional tools. Rather than a battleground against digital temptation, he inhabited a negotiated space where choice, not compulsion, guided engagement. In moments of weakness, when the siren call of infinite scroll resurfaced, he reminded himself of the emptiness that trance states once engendered, returning to rituals of breath, embodied movement, and journal writing. Through this journey, he came to view technology not as an external foe, but as a psychodynamic field where his deepest struggles played out. Each subtle nudge from the interface offered an invitation to deeper self-reflection. The algorithms that commodified his attention became inadvertent allies in revealing the contours of his own psyche. In integrating these lessons, he stepped further along the path toward wholeness, no longer merely detached from screens, but engaged with them as a conscious participant, wielding awareness as his compass. He began each morning with a deliberate pause, resisting the urge to reach for his phone, and instead sat quietly at his kitchen table, cradling a warm cup of tea. The simple act of savoring the liquid's weight in his hands became a ritual of presence, a gentle reminder that life's richness lay beyond pixelated screens. This practice marked the foundation of his commitment to digital simplicity, cultivating mindful space where undistracted attention could flourish. The first pillar of his simplicity practice was creating intentional environments. He designated specific zones in his home: a technology-free nook for reading and reflection, a minimalist workspace furnished only with pen, notebook, and a single book of poetry, and a device docking station near the entryway where smartphones and tablets were stored at designated times. By physically separating tools of distraction from areas of focus, He leveraged spatial cues to guide behavior. Entering the reading nook summoned a mindset of curiosity. Stepping into the workspace ignited creative concentration. Retrieving his phone from its dock became a conscious choice, not a reflexive grab. His next practice was establishing temporal boundaries. He divided his day into discrete segments: a morning analog hour, afternoons of deep work, and evening unplug rituals. During the analog hour, he journaled, sketched, or read printed pages, activities that engaged his senses without digital mediation. The texture of paper under his fingertips, the scratch of pen on page, and the scent of ink grounded him in the moment. In the deep work period, he kept his phone turned off and stowed, using only tools essential to the task at hand. This uninterrupted interval engendered a state of flow where ideas threaded seamlessly and projects advanced with gratifying momentum. Finally, his unplug rituals, an evening walk at dusk, preparing a simple plant-based meal by candlelight, or lying on a hammock in the backyard, served to transition from doing to being, dissolving residual mental chatter before sleep. He also embraced the practice of digital fasting, regular mini detoxes where all screens went dark for extended spans. On Sundays, he observed a full-day fast from social media, email, and news sites. Instead of scrolling, he visited local markets, conversed with neighbors, and wandered trails tracing riverbends. These digital Sabbaths refreshed his psyche, reminding him that time unfurled differently when not punctured by alerts. He noticed natural rhythms reasserting themselves. He felt hunger cues instead of clocked meal times. Energy ebbed and flowed in cycles, and dreams became more vivid come morning. With each fast, the habitual itch to check notifications lost intensity, and his relationship to digital tools grew more deliberate. To further guard his attention, he refined his digital tools. He replaced default social apps with minimalist alternatives that stripped away infinite feeds, showing only posts from close contacts. He subscribed to curated newsletters delivered once weekly instead of constant news alerts. He configured email filters to surface only messages from known senders, allowing promotional blasts to bypass his inbox entirely. By reducing noise at the source, he crafted an ecosystem where digital interactions served clear purposes: communication, research, or specific creative tasks, rather than aimless browsing. Another cornerstone was the practice of mindful consumption. When engaging with online content, he applied a set of criteria to guide his choices: relevance, depth, and intentionality. Before clicking any link, he paused to ask, "Why am I doing this? What do I hope to gain?" If the answer merely confirmed a fleeting curiosity or habitual impulse, he denied the click. If it aligned with learning goals or genuine connection, he proceeded. This simple interrogation curtailed hours lost to infinite scrolls and hermetically sealed his attention for worthwhile pursuits. He also cultivated reflective pauses within digital sessions. After composing an email or finishing an article, he set a brief timer for 2 minutes and closed his eyes, noticing how his body felt and what thoughts persisted. This interlude prevented immediate transitions to the next stimulus, breaking the momentum of continuous engagement. Over time, he internalized that nervous twitch, prompting him toward the next notification, and replaced it with a habit of checking in with his inner state. These practices extended to his social interactions. He instituted meeting etiquette for both physical and virtual gatherings, devices off or in airplane mode, cameras on for video calls, and no side chats in messaging threads. This collective discipline by invitation not only deepened the quality of conversation, but also modeled the value of presence to friends and colleagues. He noticed that when screens retreated from the social field, voices became more animated, eye contact more frequent, and laughter more resonant. Relationships felt nourished by undivided attention, reinforcing his conviction that simplicity fosters authenticity. To anchor these habits, he kept a simplicity journal. Each evening, he scribbled observations, successes in resisting distractions, moments of renewed focus, and slip-ups that revealed lingering vulnerabilities. This log served both as accountability and as a laboratory for experimentation. When he noticed his resolve dwindling midday, he tweaked the schedule, perhaps adding a brief walking break before deep work, or adjusting the analog hour to follow breakfast rather than sunrise. Through iterative refinement, his simplicity practices became resilient, adapting to shifting demands without collapsing under pressure. In parallel, he invited creativity to flourish within simplicity's scaffolding. With fewer digital crutches, he rediscovered the pleasure of boredom, the blank spaces where imagination emerges. On one afternoon, struck by a lull between tasks, he grabbed charcoal and paper and sketched the view from his window: twisted branches, drifting clouds, a bird perched on the sill. The act felt deeply satisfying, more so than any meme or shareable post. Another time, he crafted a haiku about the interplay of light and shadow in his backyard, marveling at how brief form could capture a fleeting moment. These analog expressions, unburdened by metrics of likes or shares, nurtured intrinsic motivation and rekindled a sense of creative play. Over months, digital simplicity matured from a set of tactical interventions into a lived disposition. He no longer felt the psychic tension between constant connectivity and the yearning for depth. Instead, he inhabited a fluid balance. Notifications were neither tyrants nor enemies, but occasional guests granted entry by invitation. Screens became tools, not masters, a change so subtle yet profound that he scarcely noticed its presence. In moments of challenge, a looming deadline, or an unexpected crisis, he applied simplicity principles to restore focus, pausing, detaching non-essential alerts, and centering attention on the task's core purpose. Through simplicity practice, he honored the wisdom at the heart of individuation. That authentic selfhood thrives in spacious, unhurried spaces where inner voices can be heard. By crafting environments, boundaries, and rituals tuned to presence, he generated the psychic containers where soul work unfolds. The digital landscape, once a cacophonous melee, yielded a sanctified domain where he could engage consciously, creatively, and coherently. As he prepared to transition from simplicity into the realm of sustaining authenticity, moving from disciplined practices toward ongoing self-cultivation beyond screens, he carried with him a toolkit of embodied habits. These practices, honed through trial and refinement, now formed the bedrock upon which deeper psychological integration would arise. The capacity to navigate the world with an unfractured attention and an unwavering commitment to the self's emerging truth. He carried forward the clarity and calm forged through digital simplicity into a sustained practice of authentic self-cultivation, nurturing the inner harmonies uncovered along the journey. Freed from the anarchic pull of endless notifications, he could now devote attention to the deeper longings that infuse life with meaning. His focus shifted from resisting distraction to proactively tending the garden of his soul, ensuring the seeds of creativity, purpose, and connection took root and flourished. The first pillar of authenticity was deep listening to himself, to others, and to the world's subtle rhythms. Each morning, after his analog hour, he spent 15 minutes in silent sitting, directing his awareness to the slow rise and fall of his breath. In that stillness, he invited the stirrings of his inner voice, desires, questions, and unexpressed emotions. When thoughts emerged, he noted them without judgment, then released them like leaves on a stream. This practice cultivated an inner attunement, a sensitivity to impulses that might otherwise be drowned out by habitual patterns. Over time, he found that ideas surfaced spontaneously, not as forced productions, but as natural offerings from the psyche. Next, he embraced creative collaboration. Recognizing that authenticity rarely blooms in isolation, he sought out small cohorts of kindred spirits, artists, writers, thinkers, who shared a commitment to depth. These soul circles met weekly in homes or outdoor settings, away from screens and schedules. Gathered around a worn wooden table or seated on mossy stones, they shared personal work, poems, sketches, essays, improvised music. Each presentation was followed by generous listening and gentle feedback, focusing on the work's emotional resonance and symbolic echoes rather than technical critique. This environment of mutual encouragement reinforced the courage to express his inner vision without fear of judgment or comparison. He discovered that authentic creativity thrived when held in a container of shared vulnerability and respect. To align daily living with his emerging purpose, he crafted a living mission statement. Drawing inspiration from Jung's notion of individuation as destiny, he articulated a concise declaration: to listen deeply, create courageously, and serve compassionately. He inscribed these words on a simple card placed on his writing desk. Whenever he faced decisions, whether to accept a freelance project, attend a networking event, or switch off his phone, he consulted the card. Any action that felt disconnected from the mission elicited a pause, prompting him to reconsider priorities. This emblematic guide anchored his choices in long-term aspirations rather than fleeting impulses, gradually weaving authenticity into the fabric of everyday decisions. He also cultivated ritual practices that bridged interior insights with outward expression. On the first new moon of each month, he observed a vision rite, By candlelight in his reading nook, he reviewed the previous month's journal entries and creative outputs, noting patterns of growth, persistent obstacles, and unexpected inspirations. He then wrote a letter to himself, envisioning the month ahead, projects born, relationships deepened, inner thresholds crossed. He sealed this letter in an envelope and placed it in a small wooden box. At the next new moon, he reopened the prior letter, reflecting on fulfilled intentions and recalibrating aspirations for the next cycle. This cyclical ritual fostered a sense of sacred time, reinforcing the continuity between his evolving self and the unfolding world. Community service became another avenue for authentic living. He volunteered at a local mentoring program for creative youth, offering guidance in expressive writing and visual arts. In teaching, he discovered that authenticity deepened through teaching others. Witnessing young voices unearthing their stories mirrored his own psychological excavation. Moments of breakthrough when a timid participant shared a raw poem, or when a shy artist revealed a bold painting, reminded him that vulnerability is fertile ground for growth. These encounters dissolved boundaries between inner work and social engagement, affirming that psychological depth is both personal and communal. Physical embodiment played a crucial role in sustaining authenticity. He recognized that thought alone could become solipsistic. The body needed to anchor the psyche's discoveries. He therefore adopted somatic practices, slow morning yoga flows to awaken joints and fascia, forest bathing walks to absorb nature's restorative presence, and journaling by hand to integrate kinetic and cognitive modalities. He attended occasional retreat intensives in wilderness settings, participating in silent hiking pilgrimages that interwove walking meditation with contemplative pauses at moss-covered groves. These embodied disciplines reiterated the truth that authenticity is lived through sensation, movement, and tactile engagement, as much as through reflective insight. Amid these practices, he maintained a curated relationship with technology. He continued to use his tablet for accessing digital libraries of philosophical texts and poetry, treating the device as an electronic bookshelf rather than an entertainment hub. He scheduled monthly tech reflection sessions, during which he reviewed his digital usage logs, noted emerging temptations, and adjusted settings to minimize friction against presence. For instance, if he noticed a spike in idle social media checks, he introduced a two-step unlock process requiring him to articulate a clear reason for opening that app. This on-the-fly recalibration ensured that technology remained a conscious tool rather than a dormant seducer. To cultivate resilience against inevitable setbacks, he integrated a practice of compassionate self-inquiry. When old habits resurfaced, the pull of late-night scrolling or the anxiety of unfinished digital tasks, he responded with curiosity rather than condemnation. He would sit with the discomfort, tracking its bodily location and tonal quality, and ask, what need is this behavior trying to meet? This inquiry often revealed underlying fears, isolation, inadequacy, or the lure of avoidance. By bringing gentle awareness to these emotions, he offered himself the very compassion he had long coveted from external sources. Over time, these pauses of self-kindness replaced reactive avoidance with mindful presence. Finally, he celebrated milestones to honor progress. At 6-month intervals, he hosted informal gatherings, an afternoon tea or sunset picnic, inviting friends who witnessed his journey. He shared stories of transformation, recited poems written in solitude, and displayed tactile creations born of analog rituals. This public acknowledgement of inward work reinforced that authenticity has both private and shared dimensions, bridging interior depth with community celebration. Through these interconnected efforts, deep listening, creative collaboration, mission alignment, ritual, service, embodiment, mindful technology use, self-compassion, and celebration, he wove authenticity into the warp and woof of his life. He no longer toggled between fragmented roles, but inhabited a singular, coherent presence. His creative output gained vitality, imbued with symbolism and emotional candor that resonated with audiences. Relationships deepened as he engaged from a core of genuine openness rather than performative polish. Even in brief interactions, an exchanged smile with a stranger, a thoughtful comment in a meeting, he carried the quiet gravitas of a psyche at home within itself. In the end, Jung's secret revealed itself not as an esoteric truth, but as a living reality. Psychological advancement advancement unfolds when one rides the psyche of external clutter, both digital and psychic, and nurtures the authentic self through intentional practices. Digital minimalism served as the initial catalyst, clearing the path for individuation and authentic self-discovery. But true psychological sophistication emerged in the sustained cultivation of inner alignment, creative expression, and compassionate engagement. This integrated way of being, anchored in presence, ritual, and community, transcended the binary of online versus offline, forging a life unified by intention and depth.